Hello there, welcome to my trophy guide for Stranded Deep. Just a quick heads up before we do anything, this game is randomized for every playthrough, so it's quite likely that your game will be different to my game. Only in terms of the way the islands look and the resource distribution and where the loot is. However, it is still random, so what you see in this video won't exactly be your experience. It'll be the same, but slightly different, you know? But not to worry, you'll find everything you need, there's lots of exploring to be done. You might even be lucky and have even more materials than I do in this. Now first of all, before we even begin playing the game, I would recommend that you go to the cartographer menu and make 4 large islands with as many resources as you can. Mostly, you'll want large palm trees, which are the ones at the bottom of the list, young palm trees, yucca plants, and as many animals as you can fit and as many wrecks as the island will allow. Also, it's a good idea to add some clay because clay is quite handy. Now the shipwrecks will be where the random chance will come into play, since the shipwrecks have the containers inside of them, and whenever you open a container, it's randomized. You could find anything in there. It could be a fishing spear, it could be a tin of beans, or it could be something really useful, and that is why having as many wrecks as possible is a good idea. Now making these 4 islands will take a few minutes because there's no copy and paste feature, unfortunately, but this effort will pay off in the long run, so make sure you make 4 islands with slightly different resources per island, you know? Maybe instead of clay on one island you put a load of stone, and maybe on the other island you put more farming materials, you know? Either way you do it, make sure it's full of resources and very large. Now once you've made your 4 big islands full of all the goodies, you'll want to go to the world editor place and put your islands up, down, left and right of the middle island. Now the center island here in the middle, that's the island you spawn on when the game starts. So ideally, you want to be surrounded by your custom islands. Now from my experience, the red squares don't appear up, down, left or right from the center. They only seem to appear on a diagonal. Now it may be possible that a red square can spawn in one of the cardinal directions, however that has not happened to me, so hopefully it doesn't happen to you. Either way, it doesn't matter, as long as you are surrounded by your goodie islands, then all is well. Now, we can start the game. If you want, and I would recommend this, you can change it so that the animals are passive in this menu here. Now you can always change this later on, so if you accidentally start the game or just are absent-minded, you can change it when you pause the game, when you get into the game. Passive animals just means that certain animals won't attack you for being on the same planet as them. It's very helpful to not have animals trying to kill you every 2 seconds. After your plane crashes, swim out of this little hole here, swim straight up and try to get on your lifeboat. The first thing that will happen now is that a tutorial will appear. You'll want to actually do this, don't think you're some sort of survival expert, do this tutorial. For a few reasons. For one, it's a trophy to finish the tutorial. No brainer. For 2, it'll give you all the basics and show you how to actually play the game. And for 3, it will give you some extra trophies. During the tutorial, you'll make a stone tool, you'll skin a crab, and you'll cook a crab. A bunch of trophies, all in one, just by following some text on the screen. Once you've gone through the tutorial, you should have knowledge of coconuts and tools, and you should have a shelter and a place to cook. Now remember, the game does not have an autosave, so you need to go back to your shelter every time you want to save your game. And remember to save often. Now you may be tempted to look inside the life raft storage bag. However, there is an item in that storage bag that will prevent you from getting a trophy. And that item is the compass. My arch nemesis. If you use the compass, then you won't get the trophy for finishing the game without using the compass, and we can't be having that. So feel free to take the rations out and the duct tape, but leave that compass well alone. Now, the game is about to get much harder, because we're going to be going for another handful of trophies all in one go. The main trophies we'll be going for will be to stay on one island for 10 days straight, to not eat any meat for 10 days straight, and to not eat any fish for 10 days straight. Essentially, you have to become a vegan hermit. Now, this isn't as bad as it sounds, since you can sleep in a shelter to pass the night, you can eat and drink from the coconuts, you can make a farm if you're lucky enough to have any other fruits or potatoes on your island, and you can also make a water still to collect the water throughout the day. Of course, this will take some time to do, and you will need to level up your crafting skill to be able to craft some of these items. However, you have 10 in-game days to do whatever you want, so what else are you going to do other than craft a bunch of stuff? Like you may have figured out from the tutorial, coconuts are absolutely brilliant. However, much like in real life, coconuts are a natural diuretic. Drink or eat too many of them and you'll shit yourself. Since you'll be living off coconuts for the next 10 days, be sure that you only drink 2 coconuts and eat 3 halves, maximum. Give it some time before you drink or eat a coconut again. Dehydration is no joke, and it will only serve to make the game harder for yourself. I'd recommend that you use these 10 days on this island to craft as many things as you can, especially since one of the trophies is to craft every item in the game at least once. Now you can tell which items you've crafted because there's like a little orangey brown splodge behind the item in the menu. Making yourself some tools is always a good start, and doing that should eventually get you to level 2 crafting. And that means you can make yourself a water still, which is absolutely the god item. Make sure you utilise the pin feature so that you can keep an eye on the resources you need. I find that to be incredibly handy. Once you have all the gear to make a water still, you can place it wherever you want. In my experience, it doesn't really matter where it is, if it's in the shade or out in the open, doesn't seem to make a difference. You will, however, need to place either palm fronds or fibrous leaves at the bottom part of the still before it will start to collect water. So be sure to top it up every so often to keep your water supply going. You may have noticed from the tutorial that yucca trees regrow quite quickly, so you shouldn't have any issues filling up the still. In fact, I'd recommend that you make 2 or even 3 stills. The more the merrier, really, but don't go too overboard with it since you'll need to fill these stills up, and you don't want to use all of your leaves. Speaking of the yucca trees, they will become your best friends. Smacking them with a tool will make them drop fibrous leaves, which you can then either place on your water still, you can put them on a fire, you can make rope out of them, and later down the line you can even make cloth. But making some cloth is actually a trophy, so you'll definitely be seeing a lot of the yucca tree. Alternatively, if you look for the little grassy baby trees that are on the ground here, and you smack those, they will also yield fibrous leaves, and they grow back quite quickly, so you should never really be too far away from some fibre. I have to warn you right now though, before you start going exploring the island and the little bit of the ocean that you're allowed in, there are certain things on the beach and in the ocean that can poison you. Look for anything spiky. These purple things on the beach will be your main antagonist. If you stand on one of these things, you'll be poisoned. Now, poison just gradually drains your health until you eventually die. You can tell you've been poisoned because your skin will have all these raised bumps on it. Also, it says in the menu you've been poisoned. It's also quite obvious when it happens. If you're lucky, your island may have a herb called PP. If you get 2 PP, you can create an antidote for poison. But if you don't have any PP, then you'll just have to wait for the poison to stop by itself. This will usually take a few days, so let's hope you have enough coconuts and water to keep you healthy. In between all of the crafting and exploring of the island, I'd recommend that you craft yourself a fishing spear and either a meat smoker or a hobo stove. Ideally, you want both of the cookers, but there's a chance that your island may not have any barrels. Have a look in the shipwrecks, see if it does. If not, don't worry. As long as you don't swim past the drop-off point at the edge of the island, then you're still eligible for the Hermit Trophy. Use this opportunity to explore any of the wrecks. You never know what you might find in there, especially in those containers. Those are the rectangular boxes with container written on them. I'd suggest that you actually pick those up and take them back to your island, so you can use them as a sort of storage. Although, if you're anything like me, your island will quickly become a bit of a landfill. Still, these containers are very useful, and you can't craft them, so be sure to pick them up when you're out and about on your travels. Now, I mentioned earlier making a fishing spear and a cooker. Just because you're going vegan for 10 days doesn't mean you can't hunt and cook some fish. Get yourself that fishing spear and get as many fish as you can carry. Bring them back to base, drop them on the ground, and skin them with your knife. And then you can cook them over the fire. If you're lucky enough to get yourself a hobo stove, this is much more effective, since you can just drop all the meat on top and cook them in one huge batch. If not, then you'll just have to do them one at a time, or try and put them on the smoker. Now, why are we doing this, you might ask? Well, you see, hunting for food will level up your hunting stat, which means you'll do more damage with weaponry. Very useful later on. And cooking this fish will level up your cooking stat. Leveling up cooking means that any food you consume will fill your hunger bar even more, as well as your thirst bar, it would seem. So yeah, we can't eat any of these fish, but we can use them for practice. Now, I have noticed that your cooking stat doesn't seem to increase unless you're close to the food while it's being cooked. So don't run off while it's cooking, just sit next to the fire and soak up the XP. Another thing to keep in mind is that palm trees don't grow back. So once you've felled the tree, chopped it up for wood, and eaten all of its coconuts, it will remain a stump for the rest of the game. So, whilst it might seem like fun to get yourself a hammer and create a fancy little island retreat, be sure that you're using your materials wisely and not wasting anything. Now, you remember those rations I told you about earlier? Well, I've heard some conflicting reports on these. Some people say if you eat the ration, then you void your vegetarian trophy. However, that wasn't the case for me. I got myself poisoned and I ran out of coconuts, so the rations were my last resort here. Rations replenish both hunger and thirst, so they are really good to have. And like I say, for me, it didn't void the vegetarian trophy. So hopefully it won't void it for you either. Maybe they updated the rations to be plant-based or something? Who knows? Not to worry if it does void the trophy though, because fish are not considered meat products. So if you just live off fish after not getting the don't eat fish for 10 days trophy, then you should also get your don't eat meat for 10 days trophy. It's a bit of a weird one. Now then, since you'll just be crafting, hunting, cooking, and mostly just waiting around for a while, let me give you some tips and tricks to make the rest of the game go by a little bit easier for you. Start thinking about building a raft. A raft will be a very crucial piece of kit for you after your 10 days is over. Doesn't need to be big, but they do require a lot of wood. You might get lucky on your island and you'll be able to find yourself some balls or tyres or barrels, and you can use these instead of all the wood. Now, from what I've seen, it doesn't really matter what material your raft is made out of. The buoyancy seems to be the same. However, there does appear to be a slight difference between wood and the metal barrels. That could just be some sort of placebo though. And don't worry about making a nice pretty raft. You'll need to craft all of the raft pieces anyway for that trophy where you craft everything, so just make whatever and place it wherever you want. Yeah, the raft might look a bit scrappy, but we're going for a trophy here. We're not trying to win the prettiest raft of the year award. Speaking of the raft, you'll want to make a canopy over wherever you place your rudder. Now this is so you don't get sunburned while you're out steering the raft. You also want to make sure that your sail is facing the right way. Thankfully, the arrows, when you place this down, will give you a pretty good indication. Make sure that you hold L2 and drag your raft, your life raft, or anything that's floating in the ocean onto the shore. You don't want anything floating away, because you could end up losing it. Although when it comes to rafts, you can put an anchor on it to prevent it from floating away, which is very nice. Other things though do not have that luxury, so make sure that anything floating in the ocean is dragged back to shore. A crafting tip for you. You don't actually need to have all of the items in your inventory for you to be able to craft something. If all of the required items for crafting are within your sight and close enough, you can actually craft them all from the floor, which is very handy when you're working with limited inventory space. Now this tip is very important. The meat smoker. Now then, when you use the meat smoker, it actually has 2 stages, so don't be too hasty with it. You can hang up 5 pieces of meat on the rope here, and once there's a fire underneath, then the meat will start to cook. Now then, like with any other meat when you're cooking it, you will hear a microwave ding sound, and that means it's cooked. However, leave the meat on this rope for some extra time, until you hear a sort of alarm chime. Then check the meat. You'll see now that the meat has become smoked. Smoked meat will never spoil, so you can keep that food in a container or in your backpack for the rest of the game, and it will be as fresh as the day it was sliced. Very important to know and very useful. If you have the animals on passive, then going into the ocean, even though it's absolutely terrifying, is completely safe. Well, not completely, you can still get poisoned, so watch out for that, but exploring the ocean is quite useful since you can find little clay clusters. Clay is very useful, and you can get 5 clay per cluster. Get yourself a pickaxe and smack that cluster, and hopefully the clay doesn't fall in an awkward position. Speaking of clay, when you get around to building your furnace and your brick station, be sure to place them close to each other. Now, you probably have the common sense to do that anyway, but I'm just making sure that you do it properly, since to make bricks, you'll need to have both the furnace and the brick station at the same time. So it's no good having a furnace in one area and then miles away you have a brick station. Make sure you place them close by, otherwise you'll have a very hard time making bricks. It's mentioned in the tutorial, but keep an eye on your watch. Press triangle, open it up, and have a look. This thing has lots of useful information. During the day, you want to keep an eye on the UV section at the top right there, and the SPF meter on the bottom. Staying in the sun for too long will cause you to get heat stroke, so be sure to get into the shade every so often, or take a dip in the ocean to cool off. You can also get some aloe vera and rub it on your skin if your island has some. If your island doesn't have any, just keep in mind for the future that aloe vera is very good for the skin. Another tip for you is if you open your crafting menu and press square, you can inspect the item, and that'll show you what the required materials are. So in essence, you should never really be lost as to what you need, since the game practically tells you everything you need to know right there. And there's only a few things in the game, like engine parts or duct tape, that can't be crafted. Most things can be crafted from basic materials or even just found along beaches. Navigation is a huge part of this game, and because we're not using a compass, you might have some trouble keeping track of where you are. Hopefully, with the tips I'm about to give you though, you'll be able to get your bearings a little bit more easily. When you're in the main menu and you look on the cartographer map, you'll see that it's in the shape of a grid. However, in this grid, up is not north. As you can see by this little compass here in the top, diagonal up right is north. So it's very easy to get disoriented. The best thing to do is to find a landmark. For me, the escape plane is directly north of my island, so I know if I'm on my island and I look at the plane hangar, I'm facing north. And of course, much like in the real world, the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. Another way to tell which direction you're facing will be to use the custom islands that we made. If you did manage to put them down up, right, left and down, then you'll be able to use them as a sort of makeshift compass. Obviously, the render distance might not be high enough for you to see too much detail, but you'll be able to identify the general shape of your custom islands, and that should be enough to know whereabouts you are, especially if you're just looking for the center island. You can just look for one of your big islands, and then you'll know straight away you're close enough to the middle. And the final tip I have for navigation is that when you build the gyrocopter, it actually has a compass on the control panel. So you can just saddle up next to it, have a quick glance and you can find your direction that way. The gyrocopter does use a lot of fuel though, so it's not something that you can just take with you everywhere, unless you just keep stocking up on loads of fuel like you're in Mad Max or something. When you're stuck on your island, it's likely you won't be getting any leather. However, if you're prepared for a little bit of a mini boss fight, then you can turn your animals from passive to default, and then go into the ocean. Listen out for the music to change, and then keep an eye out for a shark. If you can get on top of a rock that's near-ish to the surface, then the sharks won't be able to attack you. Get yourself some crude spears and skewer these boys. These types of sharks will give you 3 leather and 3 large meat. If you're up to the challenge, it's a great way to get some extra resources. Now then, hopefully that should be enough advice to get you through the 10 days. Don't worry if you can't get through the 10 days immediately. Sometimes your island might not have enough coconuts or other foodstuffs to keep you going. If that is the case, you can travel to one of the custom islands that we made earlier and try and survive there for 10 days. Your custom islands will be full of goodies, so surviving there should be a little bit easier. However, it is faster and easier in the grand scheme of things to make your base on the central starting island, since that way you can make a mental map of where you are. Once you get back to your base, you know you're in the dead centre of the map. It just helps for future reference, you know? Well done, you survived for 10 days without eating meat or fish, hopefully. Now you can hunt for any food you want and cook it and chomp it to your heart's content. As you probably know, fish are very plentiful and easy to cook, so you'll never go hungry now. Now all you need to worry about is that H2O. If you've made a raft, you can go sailing off to other islands and explore. There's tons of goodies out there to find. If you haven't made a raft, don't worry, there's a life raft, you can use that instead. That'll serve the purpose of exploring, although it is quite slow and the storage is not very good. So I'd recommend you make your own raft whenever possible. While you're out there exploring, don't get bogged down by carrying too much stuff. If you want to carry more stuff and save on inventory space, I'd recommend you craft the tool belts. You need to craft them anyway for a trophy, but they are very useful. You can have up to 4 tool belts, and that means 4 tools, which will free up 4 slots. The way you do this is you craft the tool belts, you hold down L1, and then you press the direction on the D-pad and pick your item. So let's say you press right, then you select the tool, then you press X. Boom! You can now press the corresponding button on the D-pad to use that item. Amazing! You also want to keep an eye out for those containers again, because what you can do there is you can put things in the container and then pick the container up. So that's 1 slot in your inventory. Terrific. Every time you reach a new island, you should make yourself a campfire. Knock down a tree and then get the 4 logs. Open up your crafting menu and make a campfire. The reason we're doing this is because there is a trophy for placing a campfire on 5 different islands, and then another trophy for placing a campfire on 5 more islands. So every island you visit, plonk down a campfire and get those trophies. Once your raft is big enough, it's time to get a little bit of a fiddly trophy. This one might take some time, since your raft needs to be big enough and buoyant enough to carry 8 animals on it at once. Now the description for this trophy is to collect 2 of each land animal on your raft and sail into a storm. These land animals are the hog, the boar, mini hog, the giant crab, and the night snake. The night snake can be found during the day though, which is quite confusing, but there you go, what are you going to do? What you need to do for this trophy is to kill those animals and then drag them onto your raft. You'll probably have to fiddle with their positions to keep the raft afloat. You don't want too much weight on one side or you'll sink the raft. When the storm came in for me, I panicked and all of my animals fell into the sea. So keep a cool head, prepare yourself before a storm comes, and you don't actually need to sail directly out into a storm. As long as your raft is in the ocean when the animals are aboard and the storm is on the way, then you'll get the trophy. hopefully. Just be sure that all of the animals are on the raft. It's a bit fiddly. Another somewhat tricky trophy is to scavenge all of the survivor remnants. A survivor remnant is this type of structure here. They'll always have a skeleton in them, and that is how you know it's a remnant. From my experience, you can pick up all of the stuff they have here and then just drop it further away, and it'll still count as you scavenging the location. The amount of remnants is randomised per playthrough, so you could get this quite quickly, or it might be one of your last trophies. Thankfully, it's easy. You just walk up and take their stuff. I mean, they're not using it anymore. There is also a chance that you will find Wally at one of these remnants, which is another trophy, and he will be your best friend forever. Although sometimes Wally may have rolled off and just be on the beach, keep an eye out for him. Here is a very hard trophy, but I'm going to make it so much easier. This trophy is to not sleep on land for 10 consecutive days. The exact opposite of the Hermit trophy. Now, not sleeping on land does not mean that you can't go on land and explore and then come back to your raft. However, there has been some rumblings online that leaving the raft to go back to land can void this trophy, so it's better not to risk it. What you're going to need is a raft with an anchor and a canopy. Ideally, you also want a container shelf on the raft as well for storage. To survive out in the ocean, you're going to need a lot of smoked meat. A whole container full of large or medium meat should be enough. Now, as for the H2O, you'll need to make some clay flasks. Quite a few of them. At the very least, you'll need 10 clay flasks. But it's always good to have backups. A clay flask will be able to carry 5 sips of drink, which should last you for a day, but having more flasks is always a good idea. Now, don't go too crazy with it, but think about having maybe 12 or 13 clay flasks. You'll also need to fill these flasks up with water before you go out, of course. They don't just come pre-filled. You'll also need a sleeping bag on your raft. Now, crafting a sleeping bag is a trophy in and of itself, so that's nice. So craft one of those and stick it in one of the containers. Now all you need to do is sail out into the ocean, drop anchor, place your sleeping bag in a nice spot, and sit under your canopy. From here, all you need to do is wait for 10 in-game days. Eat food and drink water whenever necessary, and with enough preparation, this will be easy, although quite boring. As an extra backup, I would suggest you bring some rations with you, because as we know, rations restore hunger and thirst. You know, you want to play it safe, make sure you bring more than you need. Like I say, if you want, you can go back to land and get your resources, then come back to the raft and sleep. That may work. However, there has been some conflicting reports. So if you want to do that, go back to base, get your food and drink, come back to the raft and then sleep, that's fine. Let me know how that works out for you, if you do go ahead with that method anyway. But to absolutely guarantee the trophy, you'll want to stay on this raft for 10 days. Now, since you're just going to be sat here, you can either watch a film or something and just relax, or you can take a fishing rod with you, so that you can get yourself the fishing trophies. Fishing might seem hard initially, but there is an easy trick to it. Cast out into the ocean, no bait needed, no hook needed either. You just get the rod and the bobber and put the bobber in the ocean. Once the bobber's out there, you can just tap R2 to reel the bobber back to you slowly. And if the bobber comes in range of a fish, it will latch on. Now, to get the fish back to you, you just need to press R2 in a slow rhythm. Pull and let go. Pull and let go. If you use that method, you'll get the fish every time. Now all you need to do is get 10 fish and you'll get your trophies. Good luck on the Seafarer trophy. As I say, bit hard, but hopefully with the method I've given you, it should work. Fingers crossed. There are 2 more trophies here, which is to make a boat engine and a gyrocopter. They use the same materials, and it's self-explanatory. Just pin the materials and then find what you need in shipwrecks. Now, to make these things function, you will need a fuel still. Now, to make the fuel still work, you actually need to put potatoes into the boiler. So having a little spud farm is very useful. It doesn't matter if your spuds are spoiled or fresh, Either way, you can put them in the boiler. I wonder if that works in real life. Could I fly a helicopter with a spud? Now then, you should be pretty good at the game by now. You should have a house that looks like a patchwork nightmare. You should have a good island set up that's basically self-sufficient. So, it's time for boss fights. There's 3 bosses out there in the ocean, and if you go to the main menu, open the cartographer menu, you can see the red skulls. The one called A Way Out is just the place where the ending takes place, but before you can build the plane and fly away from the islands, you need to kill the 3 bosses. Look on this map and find out where they are, and then prepare yourself. The boss fights in this game are incredibly tough, and they'll likely be the final thing that you do. Tough as they may be, there are methods which you can use to avoid taking any damage whatsoever. Although I doubt these tactics were intended by the developers, but making this as easy as possible is what this guide is all about. You'll want to craft a spear gun, and as many spear gun arrows as you can. You can carry 24 of them in one stack, and that should be enough. You should also craft a full inventory of crude spears. You could use refined spears for more damage, but keep in mind that you will be throwing these and you won't be able to retrieve them afterwards. So if you want to waste stones and leather, then that's your call. I would recommend crude spears, however. The damage isn't that big of a difference. You should also wait until the morning before you set off to fight these guys, because fighting them in the dark, absolutely terrifying. You'll also want to get full hunger and full thirst, and you'll probably also want to save your game just in case you die. With the tactics I'm about to share with you, you likely won't die, but there's always that chance. Now then, let me tell you how to easily defeat these beasts. And also, you can fight them in any order that you want, you don't have to follow my order. So, for the Megalodon, you can literally just sit on your raft and take pot shots. Try to be accurate though, and not waste your spears. The best time to take a shot is right after the Meg knocks your raft. The thing is, it's supposed to knock you off of the raft, but it doesn't seem to work, which is very good for us, but not so good for the Meg. This one is probably the easiest boss. Kill this bad boy and you'll get the rudder for the plane and the shark trophy to craft back at the base. Next up we have Luska the Great, otherwise known as the giant squid. You'll see the yellow buoy bobbing around in the ocean, and the squid will be under the water, hanging onto the chain. Absolutely horrifying. The best way to beat this guy is to brush yourself up against the buoy as close as you can, and you can even clip inside of it sometimes. If you're close to the buoy, or even inside of it, then the squid can't even touch you. Be careful if you do manage to clip inside though, because there is a chance it will eject you out on top of it, and then the squid will try and attack you. If you do pop up, just walk off as fast as you can and avoid the attack, and then push back up against the buoy. Shoot the arrows, throw the spears, victory achieved. The Big Eel, or Great Abaya. This one is a little bit more fiddly, since you'll actually have to go underwater to take advantage of the spot where you can't be attacked. Thankfully, if you want, you can craft yourself a breath boost, which will give you a little bit extra time down there. You can take one with you on the raft and then drink it prior to dropping down, if you'd like. You don't have to. The spot to fight the eel is down at the back of the ship here. You can see this railing here, and then there's a ladder right behind you. If you just float in this spot, the eel can't attack. You can then swim up for a quick burst of air and then go back down again. Try and do it as fast as you can to avoid damage. These bosses all hit very hard and cause bleeding damage, so it's a good idea to avoid taking any hits. Take your time, land your shots, and you'll easily take these guys out. They can be quite scary, but I'm sure you'll manage. I would say good luck, but you won't need it. These are so easy if you use these methods. Now, the trophy for planting every crop on one island is quite broken, so you might have to try a few methods to get this to work. If you're lucky, you can just plant them all on your home base and you'll get the trophy. However, if this doesn't work, then you'll need to make 8 farm plots on a different island. It has been said that you can only use plank farm plots as well. It's a bit of a weird one. The things you can farm are spuds, yucca, aloe vera, PP, kura, Kuwawa, Ajugar, and Wavulavula. Now those might have all sounded like nonsense words, but those are your farm crops. Keep an eye out for those things as you're exploring the islands. Kura fruit and Kuwawa fruit seem to be somewhat rare-ish, so don't be surprised if they're the last ones you find. Look for these bushy leaves here and get close to them and see if there's any fruits. Sometimes there is, sometimes there isn't. All I can say is good luck.
Hello, KlyeKlye here. I did a lot of testing to try and solve the mysteries behind this trophy, and it would seem that you need to make sure that your farm plots aren't touching each other. You also need to plant your crops during the same play session. I'd recommend you get all your crops together and plant them in one go. Hope it works out for you. Back to your unregularly scheduled human Klye voiceover.
If your farm has died, you'll notice that you can't actually water the plants anymore because they're dead. That makes sense. If you stick around until it rains, your farm will be revived. You do, however, have to be on the same island when the storm hits. Otherwise, the farm plots will not be filled with the water. To get the trophy for crafting 10 corrugated scrap decorations, you'll just want to make 10 scrap shelves. They only cost 2 scrap, so you only need 20 scrap. Sounds like a lot, but you'll be able to find that no problem. Now then, you just need to craft the monster trophies and then build the plane.
Hello again, KlyeKlye here with another glitch update. Make sure you bring a container full of smoked meat, 2 clay flasks full of water and 2 jerry cans full of fuel when you go to fix the plane. Much like the farming trophy, it would seem like the ending trophies may not pop unless you do them all together and in the same play session. I recommend you just bring your food, water and fuel all at once when you're ready to finish the game. Hope it works out for you. Back to humanish Klye. Thank you for watching. KlyeKlye signing off. Until next time.
Finishing the plane will also give you the trophy for crafting every item. That is if you've crafted all the other things as you've been playing. You'll likely have played for longer than 20 days, so that trophy should come naturally. And that seagull trophy is really weird. It'll just pop, like as you're playing. Like maybe on like day 2, it could just pop. Why it's a gold trophy, I'll never really know. You just wake up and boom, there you go, gold trophy. Well, I suppose I can't complain. If you haven't used a compass, then you'll get a trophy for that along with completing the game when you fly off. Hopefully, after all is said and done, you'll have the platinum trophy. The game is random and can be a bit fiddly, but there is no time limit and you can do everything at your own pace. So don't rush, prepare yourself and have fun. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to ask. Hopefully, I'll be able to answer your questions. Good luck on getting the platinum trophy. It's a bit of a tricky one, but I'm sure you'll be able to manage. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, take care.